Social distancing? Bah, who cares? Hey, welcome to the Fly FM Cares with me, Ivan. And with the recent COVID-19 pandemic, I'm sure you've heard of these three terms already, and that's social distancing, quarantine, and isolation. Still, there are plenty of people out there who don't believe that these steps actually work. They actually work in stopping the COVID-19 virus from spreading and making the pandemic even worse. They refuse to follow the rules. So let me just break it down for you, okay? Social distancing, or also called physical distancing, means leaving space between you and other people when you are outside your house. Why practice social distancing? Well, the main cause of the COVID-19 virus spreading from person to person is when people are in close proximity for an extended period of time. And by close proximity, we mean something like maybe a meter or two, maybe about 6 feet. And what happens is when you cough, when you sneeze, when you talk, droplets come out of your mouth, they fly through the air, and they land in another person's mouth or their nose or their eyes or whatever. And if you have the virus, those droplets have the virus too, and the person who gets it, well, they get the virus too. These droplets might even be inhaled straight into the lungs, as recent studies have shown that the COVID-19 virus can be passed from person to person even if symptoms are not shown. On top of that, what makes it even scarier is you could contract the COVID-19 virus by touching a surface that might be infected with the virus and then touching your eyes or your nose or your mouth, therefore contracting the virus to yourself. However, this is not thought to be the main way that the virus spreads from person to person. The COVID-19 virus can survive on surfaces from hours to days, depending on some conditions like sunlight, like humidity. So what social distancing does is, it just takes away that risk. It reduces the chances that you come in contact with an infected person or even an infected surface. Now let's talk about quarantine. Now, quarantine is a measure used to keep someone who might be exposed to the virus away from other people. So someone who's in quarantine or self-quarantine will stay within their house or stay separated from other people as much as possible. Anybody can contract the COVID-19 virus without knowing it. For example, if you've come back from overseas from a place with many cases of COVID-19 virus, or you might have been exposed to a group and a member in that group has been tested positive for the virus. So what a quarantine does is, without knowing beforehand whether you have tested positive or not, remove that risk of you unknowingly spreading it to another person. Now, you might be wondering, why on earth should I quarantine myself for 14 days? Why that specific amount of time? Well, the COVID-19 virus has been studied very thoroughly, and the typical incubation of the virus is about 5 days. According to Rachel Graham, a virologist at the University of North Carolina's Gillings School of Global Public Health, about 97% of people who get infected and develop symptoms will do so within 11 to 12 days, and about 99% will within 14 days. So that 14-day quarantine is sort of being considered as the outside safety margin, right? To be certain that you haven't developed an infection that you could spread to others. Now let's talk about isolation, and this is for the cases of people who are confirmed to have contracted the COVID-19 virus. They have been tested and they have come up positive. So isolation is used, it's a measure to separate the sick people from the healthy people who have not contracted the virus. So if you are in isolation, you should stay at home. Anybody in isolation, they should stay at home. In fact, even when you're at home, you should try to designate a sick room or a sick area where you come in as little contact as possible with the people who share a house with you, whether it's family members or housemates or anything like that. So that essentially is the difference between isolation and quarantine. A quarantine is for people who are not sure whether they have the virus or not, and isolation is for a person who is guaranteed, who is confirmed to be sick already. And the whole measure of isolation is used to separate sick people so that they don't infect confirmed to be healthy people. You know what I mean? The spread of the COVID-19 virus is very scary. If you look at the numbers around the world, it's mind-boggling. In fact, here in Malaysia, our government is doing its best, putting on strict measures to make sure we prevent the spread of the virus to more people in the country. Although the symptoms of the virus might seem like a common cold or just a flu, some people are actually more vulnerable to the virus than others. For example, older people. Their mortality rate, that means when they get the virus, the chances of them losing their life to the virus is actually much higher. So it is our responsibility as people who might not be vulnerable to it to protect those around us. Steps like social distancing can feel like such a hassle and such a burden, but you must understand that there are people around you more vulnerable to the virus than you are. For example, your parents who share the same house as you, they might not have the immune system to fight the virus. They could lose their lives. Or an elderly person who lives next door, or a housemate who might have an underlying health condition that makes them even more vulnerable to the COVID-19 virus. So let's do our part. We're not only protecting ourselves, we're protecting the people around us too, who we care so much about. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, we should do our part to protect those around us, our family, our loved ones, our friends as well. These are the people who we care so much about. Let's show them how much we care by practicing social distancing, quarantine, and isolation. Any questions? Leave them in the comments below. Until next time.
Fly FM, today's hottest music.